Welcome back, friends, to another Growing Smart Stronghold podcast. I am your very tired and cranky host, Thom. I don't know what happened, but once I turned 40, which has been a couple years now, and the time change happens whenever we spring forward, there's no spring in my step at all. I am dead. Time change kills me. And it's weird. It's like I go opposite. Instead of just losing an hour of sleep and being tired, it's like I don't want to go to sleep at all at night now. Last night I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't sleep. I don't get it. Time change happens. I'm exhausted. I'm all whacked out. It's terrible. And then when I'm tired like this, it's like I'm cranky, like I'm living, like I got jet lag. I have no zeal for life. It's just awful. Just awful. So I'm really starting off the podcast today on a positive note, as you can see. No, but in all seriousness, there are days when even myself, I don't feel like doing anything. When I say even myself, this is what I mean. I'm looked at oftentimes as having to be the motivational guy, right? The motivational speaker, the one who keeps a positive attitude. And by the grace of God, a lot of times I generally do. I'm kind of wired for optimism. So typically I really do kind of see the bright side. But I'm as capable, like the rest of you, of just sometimes not feeling like it. Now, here's the thing. I've got clients. I've coached enough people to know that I've got clients out there that sometimes, man, it's like every week they got days where they don't feel like it. And some of us are more prone to that moodiness, that lethargy than others. But all of us are prone to having at least days, if not weeks, and frequency may vary, but we just have time periods where we don't want to do it. Just don't feel like it. Just going to go home and I'm over it. When that happens, we are 100% likely to listen to what we're saying and not do it, not do the thing. And this is especially for entrepreneurs, because a lot of times we have the freedom to do what we want to do unless we have a prior commitment with a client. If you are prone to tossing in the towel, let me tell you, if you are up against especially business prospecting, if you're up against making sales calls, anything like that, almost always that's going to win out for the entrepreneur. Very few entrepreneurs, when they don't feel like doing it, are going to jump in and make sales calls instead. But there is a solution here. There is a silver lining, and that's what we're going to talk about today on Growing Smart. So if you don't feel like it, strap in. I'm going to help you feel like it. Here we go. So one of the things that I have become completely convinced of is that emotion and willpower are two things we have to be very, very self-aware of. So emotions are easy. You know how you feel and you know why you feel a certain way. The thing to be self-aware of is not just how you feel, but you need to be self-aware that the feelings are not necessarily legitimate. Meaning your emotional brain and your rational brain are two separate parts of your brain. You're always going to have feeling before you have logic. That's just the way the brain works. So, you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off in traffic. You first feel irritated. Then you think through it and realize, running this person off the road is not logical, so you don't do it. Hopefully you don't do it. But that doesn't make you feel less irritated that it happened. But now, becoming irritable for the rest of the day because that happened, that wouldn't be wise either. But you can't just shut off that irritability. It just doesn't happen. So you have to go on making wise decisions even though you don't feel like it. Well, sometimes that's easy. But when it comes to just like not feeling motivated and then having to go and make sales calls anyway, or you just don't feel like working out, but you're going to go to the gym anyway. Some of us have learned to do that in some areas of our life, but others of us are really challenged by this. And all of us are going to be challenged at times in this way. So that's the emotional part of the equation. What I want you to become also self-aware of is the willpower part of the situation. So how you feel, again, that's just present. The goal is to make decisions no matter how you feel. Okay, easier said than done, but that's the goal. The willpower is an even more powerful component about this. Your willpower is not equal to your emotions. Emotions are fleeting. Case in point, what I just mentioned. Some of you don't feel like doing certain things, but you do them anyway. Your willpower is greater. The will is more important than the emotions. That's what we actually have to work on. There are days I feel so good, my emotions are so positive that the last thing I do is actually feel like ruining that by doing something I don't enjoy doing. The willpower is more important than the emotion. We have to be conscious of the emotions. We have to be willing to make rational decisions in spite of our emotions. But the willpower is where we need to become very, very self-aware. For example, I always have enough willpower to do one sit-up. I can always do one. But I don't always have enough willpower to go spend an hour in the gym. Not unless all the conditions are right for me to go. The truth is that I always have a little bit of willpower. I always have a little will. And momentum comes when I execute the small amount of will. But pride tends to get in the way. Let me give you an example. There may be moments where you have a lot of willpower to go to the gym for an hour. There may be moments when you have not willpower enough to go to the gym for an hour. But would you have enough willpower to do one sit-up? If you have enough willpower to do one sit-up, and you go, but that's meaningless, see, pride gets in the way. One sit-up isn't enough. But you're opting instead for 0 sit-ups. So why not do the one? Well, another way to look at it is, why should you do the one? Well, the reason why is once you actually begin doing the one, the willpower to do the second one is much less because all the conditions are right. You're already doing it. An object in motion stays in motion. There's a great book that really explores this called Mini Habits, and I'm kind of borrowing from there. What Mini Habits help me understand is that not just that habits are so important, but that the willpower associated with forming habits is what we need to be really self-aware of. And this gentleman started just doing one push-up a day, and next thing you know, he's lost hundreds of pounds and is like a push-up competitor and personal trainer and all this stuff. But the main takeaway from the book is simply this. You need to be self-aware of your willpower and be able to work within it. If I don't feel like doing my sales calls today, and I don't, I can make one call. I can just make one call. It's much easier to go from making one call on a regular basis to making 20 calls on a regular basis than it is to go from making no calls to suddenly making 20 calls consistently. If we're being honest, most of our issue comes down to we're not disciplined and we don't have good habits. That's really the issue. If you're saying, amen, that's right, I just need more discipline and better habits, then I'm going to tell you, probably put time blocking on your calendar, all the right habits is not going to change anything. Instead, you need to recognize your willpower, and the lowest common denominator to get you started on anything needs to be figured out. For example, to get you working out, if the lowest common denominator is one push-up, then you schedule yourself to do one push-up a day, and you never do less than that. Make sense? So this willpower hack is one of the most powerful things you can do if your biggest issue is I don't feel like it. Therefore, I have a hard time building disciplined habits in my life. Instead, you need to say, when I feel like it or don't feel like it, I always have enough willpower to do X amount. And you plan on always doing that and never doing less than that. But you are allowed to always do more. Pride's going to sneak in here and try to inch that up a little bit and challenge your willpower. And I'd actually rather you moved in the other direction and make it so small that willpower is never in question. So if you don't feel like doing your calls that you had planned to do today, that's not a problem if you only need to make 2 a day. And you go, well, Thom, if I do that, I'm always going to take the easy way out and never do anything. Actually, that's not true. If you're not a disciplined, consistent person, what you tend to opt for is inconsistently doing things. So sometimes you do none and sometimes you do a lot. If you actually would have consistently done less, say just 3 calls a day, you probably would have had more calls made over the past year than you have. But here's my other point. Once you start doing the 3, it's going to take such little willpower to make 20 calls, you're more likely to do it. You're not just tricking your mind here. You are literally allowed to just do 3. And you need to be prepared to just do 3. It's just once you've done the 3, your feel like it changes. It's not just saying, well, I'm going to do 3, but really I'm going to do 20. Because what you're really telling yourself, then it's not that easy to trick your mind. What you're really telling yourself then is you're really going to do 20, so you'll do none. You really need to be okay with just doing 3. This is the major way to change your feel like it. The second way to change your feel like it is not just mastering this willpower hack, but starting to really attack the realistic benefit to what you can do. Here's what I mean. I don't feel like making my 20 sales calls today. Okay, but what would 20 sales calls bring me? Well, the truth is, if you never consistently make 20 calls, you don't know. You hope it brings you a new client, but 20 calls might bring you nothing. So the life hack here is, if you regularly track and tweak your activity, you're going to start to predictably know what you'll actually get from what you do. And if you knew 20 calls would bring you a new client, you'd make it in a heartbeat. You need to start quantifying your needs payoff. And you need to start qualifying it by quantifying it. And you do that by tracking it. So if you regularly track the activity you're doing, even the low activity, the 3 calls a day, and you just start tracking all the activity you do and seeing what you get from it, then consistency becomes easier because it becomes more predictable and we're likely to do what is predictable. As a matter of fact, that's why you're not making the calls, because you know going and taking a nap pays off. You've learned that. What you don't know is that consistently making calls pays off. You may say, well, I do know that, but if you don't have it tracked where it's scientific and provable before you, your belief in it isn't strong enough to actually do it. All right. Or your willpower is just not there, so we need to make it 3 calls a day. Last but not least, one of the ways to get out of the I don't feel like it's into the I feel like it's is to give you a very, very, very short-term reward. Here's what I mean. Kind of goes back to the willpower thing. If you know that a win would make you feel better, then you absolutely need to put yourself in the mindset of the win. Here's what I mean. I know how much I don't feel like making 20 dials today. I also know how good it feels. How good it feels to get a new client. It's kind of like working out. I know I don't feel like going to the gym and working out right now, but I know how good I feel after I've worked out. What we need to focus on is developing a craving for the good feeling. So to a point where doing the work is worth it, right? So you need to crave on a feeling that you can have immediately after. For example, I know having another $1 million in my bank account would be great, but that's not going to happen on 30 calls today. I need to focus on what the shortest term payoff is and really crave that feeling. I know how good it would feel if I just made 3 dials as opposed to making no dials. At least I could say I did something. So I'm not going to focus on the 3 dials. I'm going to focus on that good feeling that comes after 3 dials have been made. And I'm really going to make myself have an appetite for that feeling. I know how good it feels all day long after I've worked out, even a small workout in the morning, even just taking a walk. So I'm going to crave that feeling. I don't want to leave my house unless I get that feeling. Being able to trick your mind into focusing on the positive short-term payoff, if that could become a way of life, you'll find the shorter, less willpowered things, the emotions just don't get in the way. And it becomes a huge catalyst. But it's a different way of thinking, and you have to deliberately think on these things and train your mind to have better appetites. There's a few other hacks I'd like to give you, but we are out of time for today. I hope those have been helpful. You need to think through those things and put those into practice right now. We're all about implementing on this podcast. Put those things in practice right now. Begin practicing them on a regular basis. And I promise you, it won't solve all your problems, but your problems are going to get a lot smaller as the momentum picks up. I hope you feel like trying. Until next time, this has been Growing Smart, the Stronghold Podcast.